This is Kenya's biggest conversation. 8 minutes after 8. Happy Thursday, the 3rd day of November 2022. We have new guests in the studio this time. Now that we're talking about saving towards owning a home, saving towards getting some capital in the Hustler Fund, we'll talk about saving towards retirement again, this time through NSSF. NSSF is soon going to start taking 6% of your income as monthly contribution. This is after the president mediated talks between the NSSF bosses, the employer federation bosses, and the trade union bosses. And they've all said, yeah. So that matter is going to Parliament for ratification of everything. Before we welcome our guests, CT has the proverb.
Every man is rich in excuses to safeguard his prejudices and his instincts.
Every man is rich excuses to safeguard his prejudices and instincts.
This is a proverb from Egypt, land of the pharaohs.
Okay.
Otherwise known as pharaohs.
They're called pharaohs.
Pharaohs.
You know that your proverb, City?
This the proverb from Egypt.
From Egypt.
This one
which
is
you have
yours.
read.
Yes. It's in my proverb. Someone's going to think there's a place where I manufacture proverbs and then bring them to the studio every morning.
Isn't there?
No, there isn't.
Anyway, it reminds me of a concept in, I think it's in political theory, fundamentum in concussum, which means a privileged point of view which every human being possesses.
Again, the factotum thing which you said, what was it again?
Fundamentum in concussum.
All right.
Privileged point of view.
From that privileged point of view. Let's welcome our guests. They are from the Central Organization of Trade Unions. One is Dr. Damaris Muhika. She's a program director at COTU. And the other one is the boss of communications at COTU, Bruno Otiato. Good morning, lady and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation. Both of you are occupying the hot seat. In the other we had only one on the hot seat. Daisy is our guest host. She's here throughout the show today. And now we want to talk about saving towards pension. Now, you also, Daktari, sat on the board of trustees of the NSSF. How long was your tenure?
My tenure, I held my tenure since 2014, 2021, last year.
So you can tell us
6-year tenure.
who sits on the board of the National Social Security Fund?
So the NSSF Act provides for a tripartite representation. That's where a provision for workers to be represented. These are the contributors, the employers' representative, and government through the Ministry of Labor.
Okay.
Yes.
Does the law specifically say who will represent the workers?
Yes, the law is very specific, provides for the most representative workers' organization in the country. That is the Central Organization of Trade Unions. Yes.
And how about the employers? Does it also specifically say who this representation is going to be?
The most representative organization of employers.
Okay.
Yes.
So how does COTU pick its person to sit on the board?
It goes. It subjects its nominees competitively. So we have, for instance, during my tenure, we had the Secretary General now, and myself as a CEO, with his wealth of experience in labor matters. I was also competitively selected because of my background in finance and accounting.
I see.
Yeah.
So during your time, this is when the new administration had come in, the Jubilee administration, and they had looked at seeing how NSSF is a sleeping giant. And you needed to wake up this sleeping giant by making sure that it is well capitalized by members' contributions. And the proposal was taken, it went through Parliament, the NSSF Amendment Act went through Parliament to increase the members' contributions. And then the workers' representatives and the employers' representatives objected to this. Give us that background, because there are many people who do not have the background of what exactly happened around 2013, 2014.
You're right. Let me just highlight the background. We are members of the International Labour Organization. And as a country, we have labour standards that we follow to guard our people, to make sure that they are enjoying decent work. And ILO Convention 102 requires us as a country to put mechanisms in place and have social protection floors. Make sure that all our people, all citizenry, enjoy cushioning from any kind of shock. So in 2010, the Constitution pronounced itself that social protection is not a privilege, it's not a political pronouncement. It's a basic right. And therefore, from 2011, we sat as social partners and we drafted the National Social Protection Policy of 2011. And we agreed as partners that we're going to have a life cycle approach to social protection, whereby at every stage of your life, you're cushioned against shocks. Whether at childhood, you have Medicare, you have proper nutrition. At the stage of school going, you are cushioned. The working population, the population that our constituents whom we represent through the trade unions, we also provided for their cushioning. For instance, through work injury benefit, maternity protection, Medicare, and retirement, preparing them for retirement. And then there is old age. So for old age, in 2013, we sat again and we saw a need for us to review the Act, the NSSF Act, from Cap 256 to 58 to NSSF Act of 2013 and its regulations. And the rationale of us reviewing the Act as social partners is because, one, we looked at the issue of age dependency. Generally, Kenya has a critical, an extreme dependency rate, and especially age dependency rate at 81%. Meaning...
What does that mean?
Pause kidogo. Okay. This old age, when does it begin?
Old age.
You have to see something, Caesar.
I need to understand the relevance of this conversation. Yes. The reason why I asked the question, I'm going to ask about the dependency and what this means, the dependency ratio and so forth. But when does old age begin in your books?
For us, age dependency in the country, according to our National Social Protection Policy, starts at 65.
65?
Yes.
You're not. You are independent.
I'm independent. Yes.
But generally, from my experience, our productivity slurs at age 60.
Why?
Because of the biological nature of your...
It is odd, you should say that, but research doesn't agree with you. Research finding is that the productivity, if you're talking about a curve, it has an upward trajectory at that very same age that you're talking about. It's just that perhaps with opportunity and policies, it dips because it is you're actually blocked from it altogether.
Daisy, what was that political maxim you said?
Fundamentum in concussum.
Here it is in practice.
Please go on.
Yeah, so that is one, age dependency rate, which is very critical. On an average, we have an average, especially in globally, the average is at 53, but ours is on the edge at 81. Meaning, the 19 of us who are working, our constituents whom we are representing, are feeding or are being dependent upon by 81. Yes. So that puts a lot of strain to the working population. And that's why that can be related to the kind of mental disability that we're looking in the country. Because our payslips are extremely
they're hand to mouth.
Hand to mouth. And secondly, our traditional social support systems are disintegrating. Our elderly can no longer depend on us because how our economical status currently. The other rationale was that we needed to include the informal economy workers who the earlier act had not provided for their contribution. And this was a gap, since when you look at our labor market, how it's structured, we have about 85% of our workforce is in jua kali, what we call in Kenya jua kali, and they were not contributing to this kitty, and therefore leaving them exposed. Then lastly, we needed to expand the social protection coverage vertically by increasing the rate, because when you look regionally at GSC level, I think Kenya is the least in contribution. Our saving culture is its lowest at 200.
Yeah.
And
You mean
recently,
the formal government sanctioned savings schemes, because Kenyans do save. Not necessarily through NSSF. If you look at the preponderance of SACCOs, we do have a saving culture. Yes.
So the long and short here, Dr. Muhika, is that at that point, as trustees of NSSF, you saw a need to address how people can save more, can contribute more towards their pension. So there was unanimity at this point.
Yes, there was unanimity because all our initiatives are pillared on social dialogue, where we sit and we agree, we have consensus.
Yeah.
So at that point, we had a consensus
When did you
that we
begin
needed
to
to review.
disagree?
The disagreement came on at the point of implementation of the Act, where we looked at the governance structure of the institution and we found gaps. For instance, we didn't have a substantive management trustee, yet we are increasing the contribution rates. So we needed someone who has substantive powers to safeguard the interests of workers. And that was the main issue that we had. The second issue that we had as workers' representative was that there was a breakdown of dialogue. Reason being, there was concerted effort to remove representation of workers from the board. Our two representatives then, in 2013, had been removed from the board. And therefore, we said we cannot allow implementation to go on or roll out of the Act if we don't have proper structures. And we have a weakened governance structure. So that was our dissension.
The point.
Yeah.
May I ask, as a Kenyan worker, to you, my representatives, why at this time when my income is declining because of increased taxes, because of the bad state of the economy,
And growing dependency by the old people.
and growing dependency, and all these other factors that just makes what's in my pocket shrink, why are you agreeing to the increase in the NSSF contributions at this time? And another question, as a political Kenyan worker, is this an expensive apology? Because your boss was one of the loudest, most passionate and abrasive national figures against the now sitting president. Is this an expensive apology at our cost? as Kenyans paying the NSSF. And another thing, let me also clarify. Let me also put personal experience into this, saving schemes, and I'll compare it to the NHIF. Now, the NHIF, if you tell me to increase my NHIF, and NHIF is, if I'm very low down in the socioeconomic ladder, for instance, NHIF is one of those schemes that I get very tangible returns, because I go to the hospital, I get admitted, I'm getting my first child, then I realize NHIF is paying 4,000 bob for me per night. So I have a C-section, 4 nights, 3 nights later, that's 12,000 shillings. Tangible, immediate. NSSF is in a future I do not see, where I'm in a present that is so difficult. So the question is, why now?
Why now,
and
Bruno?
is it tone deaf, just based on the present circumstances that as Kenyans we are enduring? We are not thriving, we are surviving. Why our representatives?
Well, I think I understand you, Daisy. That's the question in many Kenyans' minds. And if you want to look at it, I think it's long overdue to begin with. So because, like, I think I was watching sometime in the week, the RBA, someone from RBA was here.
Yesterday.
And yesterday, right? And he talked aptly. He said, I think there are certain things that are inevitable. First is to pay taxes, and the second one is death. And I think if God gives you life, and I think even City spoke to this, then old age comes. And with old age, there is everything that comes with old age. So you need to prepare for it. So why now? We feel like this is something that should have begun as early as 2013. If you look back, when NSF began in 1966, they were saving 40 shillings. The employer and the employee 40 shillings also. And then the dollar to the Kenyan shilling was about 1 to 13 shillings. The rates have been since...
Which year was this again?
1966.
66?
Yes.
1 to 13?
Yes.
It was even lower.
Yeah.
Because the shilling, why we call it 20 bob a pound, was the exchange rate then.
Yeah, so you can...
But carry on,
For the pound.
You can imagine. Then it changed somewhere in 1977 to 80 shillings to 160 to 2001 when we set the 200 shilling rate. In 2001, I think if we were to take into consideration the inflation that has taken into place, if we were to set the 200 shilling in 2001, now it will be about 2,200 shillings. So we are lagging behind in that extent. But why we are so much pushing for it is, number one, I think we need to understand that the deductions by NSF is not a tax. Many people think it's a tax. This is money that you'll get at the end of the day when you retire, when your old age hits. It's money that you go and collect. As much as even this 200 shillings is small, the kind of smile you see in people who, when they get that check of 144,000, having worked for 30 years, they are happy getting it. I know of a man where I come from who got a check of 144 and bought a cow, and the cow is called SSF or something, because it's money he got from NSSF. Yeah. So there is that. So first, it's not a tax. Is it an expensive apology? No, it's not. I think the media has misconstrued what this is. The president is not, they are calling it the Ruto's increase, 6%. It's not. This is within the Act. The Act was there from 2013. The president and my boss, Tuoli, they are simply saying the same thing: implement the Act. The Act says 6% employee, 6% employer. And as Damaris was saying, honestly, we are lagging behind in the region. If you are looking at Rwanda, it's about 15%. Uganda is about 18%. Tanzania is 20%. And there is also, for public service workers, it's another 20%. So there is all this, and we feel it's about time. If we don't implement it now, then there won't be another better time to start this conversation, because age is catching up with you at whatever moment that you are. So you better start early.
Yeah. I think there are those concerns because, economists will tell you that pension funds have some vulnerabilities, because they are dependent on economic performance, economic crises. In 2008, OECD countries, those people who are better than us economically, their pension funds lost 23% of their value. So there are those eventualities that can cause reluctance to us as contributors. But the other reality that we should be alive to is that as Kenyans, we live in a very low trust society, especially when it comes to our leadership and us, giving making this, contributing to a scheme, contributing to a kitty that goes to the government, and you're like, is it going to be misappropriated? That is number one. But number two, which is not really you, but a reflection on the Ruto government is that, because this is what you said, people call it the Ruto, it's in the act, but people are calling it the Ruto increase. And it's a new government that was promising to give. And so people are like, but now not only we can forgive you for not keeping your promise to give, but now you are taking, what I mean.
It's the optics.
It's the optics. That's it.
It is
the political optics of it, and it has everything to do with timing.
See, when you speak, when you and Daktari speak, you speak sense.
A lot of it.
What you're saying is logical. It's easy to understand. But is it easy to consume? Because if you look at the position we find ourselves in right now, the times when you speak of, 1981, when I graduated from the University of Nairobi with the undergraduate degree, salaries ranged from 1,500 to 2,000. That was salary per month. Very good salary. Increment yearly guaranteed 200 shillings every year. You mentioned those amounts now, and one wonders, how did you survive? It was a lot of money.
Yes.
Now, you see, when inflation set in and it keeps doing what it's doing, the problem here is at the desk that you occupy and other people like you. It's how you put this message across.
Yeah.
So that it can be consumed easily. When it's thrown at you, then people will look at their circumstances, and that will form the basis and the structure within which they're going to respond to what you're saying. So even if it makes sense and even if it is good, the likelihood of it being accepted, the threshold really becomes very, very low.
So Bruno is the communications boss.
I agree with Citi, because even in the Act, the 6% that you're talking about was not, even now, it won't be implemented in a one,
it's not immediate.
one time. It's not one time.
Yeah.
It's gradual.
It's gradual. It's to be graduated. Even in the Act, it was supposed to be 5 years, over a 5-year period to implement the 6%. So now Kenyans are hearing of the 6% and they're thinking this is something that is going to be done now. And I think if we are to look at even what the Act says now, we are not basing it on the basic salary. We are basing it on the minimum wage. So the minimum wage as it stands, it's about 15,000 shillings.
13 still.
Yeah, around 15,000 shillings. And if you are looking at 15,000 shillings, then that's around 1,000 from the employer, 1,000 from the employee, if you are to calculate it in that manner. But many have not. Of course, there is a breakdown of communication, understand, from both the government, employer, employees, and NSSF. And that's something that we are also trying to work on as social partners to address, so that this information is consumed easily. Because now even that UCT understands, it's not, if the government is to start implementing the 6% today, it won't be done with 6% to start with immediate effect. It's supposed to be gradual, at around probably spread through 3 or 5 years.
See, the position the two of you occupy is tricky at best. Because you are now being asked to interpret what politicians say, and how they say it. Okay?
And in fact, then it's also unfair to actually expect those partners to be the ones who are explaining, yet the institution itself has its own management and structures. There's a managing trustee, there's a communication department within the NSSF. So it should not really be the job of Bruno of COTU to explain how the NSSF is going to implement this? Of course, you've got to explain it to your members because you
But
owe it to your members.
but remember
I want us to
also,
take a
Eric,
break.
there's
Let's take a break.
Okay.
It's 28 minutes to 9. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Bruno Otiato is the head of communication at the Central Organization of Trade Unions, COTU, and Dr. Damaris Muhika is a programs director at COTU. She is a former NSSF board trustee. Why is COTU supporting this 6% NSSF deduction on workers' salaries? That's what they're here to explain to us. Then they'll also tell us, because they sit on the board of NSSF, how they safeguard the money that we're taking in there as workers.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
One of the big issues that people have with NSSF is trust. Trust that the money is safe. Trust that they're making the right decisions with the investments that they take. And those are the questions that we're also seeing even on social media. Somebody's saying the issue really is not the amount, but the political nature and security of the savings under NSSF. There is fear of misappropriation and misuse of this money. What are you doing in the board of trustees to ensure that this money, you've been in the previous boards that have just overseen the same kind of mismanagement that has led to this kind of mistrust. What's different now?
I agree with you, and I agree with that viewer or listener that generally in Kenya we have a trust deficit, mainly because of historical issues that we have experienced, especially in managing public resources. And that has not, and NSSF has not been an exemption. We've also had issues that eroded trust. However, when you look at the kind of controls that our regulator, the regulator of pension space, RBA, has put in place. I give an example, the kind of responsibility the trustee holds, whereby you're held, if in case of any misappropriation of contributors' savings, you're held individually culpable and collectively as a board of trustee. And we have experienced trustees in their old age, in their 70s, 80s, when they are very vulnerable, being dragged to court. And that instills some kind of fear that I need to be to act as in trust. RBA requires segregation of roles. Initially, during the 80s, 90s, and early 2000, the trustees were responsible they were directly investing on behalf of the contributors. But currently, there's that segregation. Trustee and the board just gives oversight. Then the administration is given to professionals. For instance, we have custodians, we have fund managers, and we have even a stricter procurement act in place. And I can tell you for sure, among the regulators that we have, especially in the financial sector, RBA is exceptional. And those controls are there. And therefore, there's that assurance that whatever the contributors are putting into this fund will be safeguarded and is going to earn an interest.
You know, the problem is never even that, really. Because apart from putting up very, very huge structures that NSSF was known for, when it comes to the beneficiaries, the people who actually contributed to that money, the problem has always been when they realize, when they actually get what they're supposed to get. That debate is ongoing. Then the communication that is required about the funds you've saved. You know how anybody that deals with finances is always giving you more information than you need, okay? There'll be an SMS, they keep informing you, they tell you all sorts of things. Now, when someone retires, that's when they most need that money. Now, surely communication about it and what else they need to do Are we saying that it's always forthcoming now? You people work for us, the workers, okay? Is it always forthcoming? Do they know? Do they understand? Do you know that when you get to this age, when your money is due, you're told in a week's time, your check is going to be, because the stories we hear, horror stories, of people always going to those offices and never quite getting their money. And it's always one story and another and another and another. So if that isn't sorted out for the workers, and now you as people who work in the organization that's supposed to look after the interests of the workers, that's what's primary. And I mean it's primary. These are the things, it's safeguarded. We know it's safe. I mean, where is it going to go? Okay? It's there, it's supposed to be there. And everyone contributes. And it's over a long period of time. So the money just keeps increasing. It's not as though it reduces.
Yeah.
Okay? So that question, does COTU answer that question adequately? And also, when you look at the cost of living adjustment, the thinking of this pension, will it serve the purpose for which it was intended? Because that 144,000, I'm living in the rural areas, I don't pay for many things. It may sound like a lot of money. 30 years of work. And I get something that someone gets in a week, someone gets in a month, and I work 30 years for it. And in those 30 years, what is 144,000 going to do for you? Sounds like a lot of money.
Hence the dependency that that Terry was talking about. Anyway.
Anyway, you've asked multiple questions. But I can confirm, having served as a trustee, that there's lots of improvement at NSSF as an institution. There were days where one would retire and die before tasting the fruit of their savings. Would have men and women camp at NSSF doors. But currently the turnaround is about a maximum of 14 days, 2 weeks. And you can put up your claim in any branch across the country. If you're in Marsabit, you visit your nearest NSSF branch, within 40 days, you'll have your savings.
44-0. Or
14.
1-4.
So the problem was institutional efficiency, which is something that has been addressed to lessen the turnaround time.
And that improvement is mainly because of the tripartite nature of the institution. Because we have observed, and this has been proven, that whenever there is dialogue, whenever workers, employers, and government are sitting on the table, everything is anchored on governance. And good governance requires that we have representation of the people, the subject, or the constituents that that are contributing. And that is the result of the kind of engagement that we had while seated on the table. That kind of improvement, especially on efficiency. Yes.
Yeah, and also what CT pointed out about just the importance of communication and clarity, especially when it has to do with money, because you would be shocked at the levels of misunderstanding that we Kenyans have in the face of such issues. For example, I have heard, opinions of people saying, this is just a strategy for government to raise money we're basically raising money for government budget, including recurrent expenditure. It's because William Bruno can't do what Kibaki and Muraria did in terms of raising money domestically, putting forward bonds for a few Kenyans to raise money. Now they're levying all of us to pay for expenditure, including recurrent expenditure. So this is money that we will not see, So it's also about finding a way to distill that communication in a very consumable format, as Eric was saying, because this is something so fundamental. It's about money. It's about the years of sweat that CT is talking about. It's working 30 years and then not getting what your dues should be. It's heartbreaking and it's devastating.
Something else, Daisy, is when you look at, say, if you talk to the Retirement Benefits Authority, this pension isn't just something you need to wait for until you get to some advanced age.
Yeah.
It can help you do very many other things.
Like home ownership.
Yes, it can. It's a security that you can use to actually do very many things. But if people do not know this,
Yeah.
and even when you talk about, even if it was money that the government intends to show up, it's the monies it can access, that is in itself is not a bad thing. You know why? If you look at countries like, say, Japan, people like quoting Japan, where what you're talking about, the debt to GDP ratio is at 200%. But they borrow domestically.
They're more domestically.
Yes, and it's
From
in
the
their
savings of
currency.
their workers.
So the direct beneficiaries are their people. So if NSSF decide to take our money and lend to the government, whatever bond it is, that interest should accrue to us. So no problem there. But it also means that whatever I'm saving gets better with the years because of that sort of engagement. That isn't a bad thing.
And that is the trust element where I'm
Yes.
saying I am trusting this institution and I'm trusting this government to not only safeguard my money, but to invest so that I'm personally in years to come, I'm getting a return that has doubled my money or tripled my money or has factored in inflation. And that money there in the future will actually be commensurate to my needs.
In fact, Daisy, to make it more interesting, it shouldn't be that if my pension is 2,000 shillings a month, it remains 2,000. Because that 2,000 I'm getting is part of what I've saved. If there is a benefit accruing, because I know people who benefited, where your pension increases. As things change, you suddenly find it's moved to a certain amount and it keeps improving.
Yes.
And that informs the tagline that NSSF uses, growing you for good. So the NSSF wants the responsibility of the trustee or a trustee is one to safeguard and to grow
Yes.
your savings. So that if for instance, you have saved 200,000 shillings, by the time you're retiring, there will be a yield to it. That is 250 the time you're leaving. So it's expected that we and that's why we are required by the regulator to have investment policies where and they give directions, and every investment opportunity is capped. For instance, you can invest in, let's say, in property to this portion or percentage. You can invest in equity to this extent, or you can invest in treasury bonds to this extent, so that you're not biased. Because we've seen, for instance, in self-help groups and let's say cooperatives, where the representatives or your representatives decide to be biased towards one kind of an asset. They'll go for land. And all your monies are...
It's all tied in land.
Yes, all tied in land.
And that's what NSSF used to do before. So it's, if we look at the current contributors to NSSF, because of the statutory nature, so those who are formally employed must contribute to NSSF. Is there a plan to have voluntary contributors to NSSF, or is that part of
It's in place.
what's allowed?
Yeah.
And so what plans are in place, as far as you know? Because we're not asking you, we understand you're not an SSF, but what plans are in place to widen that base so that we have more and more voluntary contributors towards NSSF, growing that base as well?
So the Act of 2013 I mentioned was addressing two issues. One, to expand the coverage horizontally to especially our target was to expand it to the informal economy. The 85% of the workforce that is not contributing towards their retirement. And they is provided for their contribution through voluntary approach. And theirs is a provident fund. So once they hit the retirement age, they'll be able to claim, and they are going to receive their savings in lump sum. Then the rest who are formally employed are going to enjoy a pension. But even those that are contributing voluntarily can also have an arrangement, what we call a drawdown approach, where they can also receive some form of pension. Yes.
And the difference here between pension and provident fund being?
The provident, you receive a lump sum.
One
the pension is a monthly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
There's a lot of awareness that is needed, and it's not now I come to you, Bruno. You speak for the workers, you speak to the workers as well. What has COTU done since that time when there was a handshake in State House to speak to the workers and tell them through the various, of course, you're a federation, so you are a central organization, so your members are trade unions. What have you done to speak to the trade unions so that they can go and speak to their members? So members, everybody understands what this 6% means and the importance of the 6%.
I think this is one of the things we are doing. I mean, we are in a studio talking about the same matter, but over and above that, I think the way COTU works is that we are like an umbrella body that brings all trade unions together. So they come to us and we have regular meetings with general secretaries of different trade unions. So for instance, this month on the 25th, we'll be having a meeting with general secretaries, I believe. And among the agenda items will be this, to discuss how this information can be cascaded down to members. But other than that, we also do meetings with our shop stewards level to have discussions on this. It's communicated because we have a database of them. So whenever there is need-based communication like this, we try to communicate. And over and above it, I think the representatives of the NSSF who are from COTU have also been actively involved in I think it's huge because every time they attend these meetings, the board meetings, it comes with a positive impact to the Kenyan workers, because from where we sit, we get also the views of the Kenyan workers, and most of them don't have a problem from where I sit with contributing even 5,000 towards NSSF. They have a problem with the wage. So the problem is, and I think Daisy also asked this question about the current government of His Excellency President Ruto. So the problem they have, and why COTU is equally in the same bracket as His Excellency, is because he's come out as a more worker-friendly even president than we thought, because he's here championing for social protection. I mean, it's among the key objectives of COTU as an organization. And in doing that, we are believing, and I think the next conversation now after this is probably how do we move or implement the minimum wage, because we have a minimum wage in the country, and it's the government. COTU doesn't have a sword to implement most of the policies by the government. So we do have tried to engage the Ministry of Labour, but I believe the gesture, at least the president has shown, and considering most of the persons who elected him are, they fall within the category. I think even looking at the data that we have from KRA and Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, is majority of Kenyans above, I think, 50% and below 50,000 shillings. So those who earn
50%,
more than 50%,
is higher than that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So because I think only, is it 10% and above 100,000?
Yes.
So a majority of them need the implementation of the minimum wage. And COTU is moving the discussion ahead to just not discussing the minimum wage, which is 15,000, to start discussing the living wage. Because now in Nairobi, if you are working in Nairobi and you're being paid 15,000, yes, it's a minimum wage, but can you survive with it? So when you have that in your pocket, because if you have that money in your pocket, then you can have the latitude not only to just pay NSSF as a provident fund, but also as a pension fund, because NSSF is in two tiers. There is the tier 1, which is the provident fund, then the tier 2, the pension fund. Then you can also join a SACCO, because most of them, I mean, if you are looking at the data from the cooperatives, is not majority of Kenyans enjoy the luxury of even saving in SACCOs.
Yeah.
So there is that discussion, and we are hoping that His Excellency will be accommodative towards ensuring that, I think among his legacy projects should be at least that the standards of workers have been improved, especially in terms of the wages they get.
Yeah, so in order for the workers to not think that the president is actually working at cross purposes to what their needs are, one of the very important things to communicate is what you talked about earlier in terms of the graduating the 6%. Yeah, this is something that perhaps even needs an infographic. When is it going to affect me, and in what way, and how does it affect me based on my salary scale level? Because just as a blanket statement like that, it's scary. In addition to all the other taxes that we'll have to contend with, and I'm calling it tax loosely because it is not a tax, it's a deduction, and it's money that I get back in a future, in the future, or in a future that I don't know if I have.
You have.
In fact, no, I'm not speaking as Daisy, just generally as a Kenyan,
okay.
And especially as a Kenyan, lower down on the socio-economic bracket, because right now is more important than ahead, because if I can't feed my children now. I have a question regarding that, actually. What happens to, Dr. You mentioned that there's some unfortunate incidences where people did not get to enjoy those deductions that they had been contributing through the years. What happens to that money? What happens to the contributions of people who midway are deceased?
The Act provides for the institution to identify your dependents.
So next of kin.
Yeah, those that you declared, and maybe those that you failed to, because sometimes you can enroll
when people enroll,
when you're single.
They're very young,
Yeah.
and it's just them.
Then the dependents come
Unmarried.
along.
And next of kin is them. Okay, so
Yeah.
Or you put your girlfriend and then...
I think there's a form that they give.
No,
Yes.
do
So your
they-
contributions then should go to those that are listed
your
as
dependents.
your dependents.
Yes.
So it's not lost. And if your dependents don't come along, then the money is taken to the Unclaimed Financial
Yes.
Assets Authority.
Yes.
Not really. The level of tracing that NSSF does,
is high.
we rarely have any amounts that has been handed
Unclaimed.
over to UFA.
Right.
Yes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you for clearing the air on what you're doing politically. But we need you to come back and tell us about the governance of COTU itself.
Yes.
It's another big issue and a big conversation. Dr. Damaris Muhika is Programs Director at the Central Organization of Trade Unions, that's COTU, and is a former board trustee of the NSSF. Bruno Otiato is the head of communications at COTU. We've been talking about why is COTU supporting the 6% NSSF deduction on workers' salaries. We now understand better. Thank you for joining us. Keep it here for more conversations. We'll be here on Justice Thursdays. Daisy is our guest host. She stays on.